This is the beginning of a series called Decoding Communication. This is session 1, and in this session of Decoding Communication, we're going to talk about boys and girls, men and women, and by the way, there are differences, as you will find out. Session 2 is called The Secret That Decodes the Communication Problem, that key that unlocks that communication problem between a man and a woman, between husband and wife. Each session has its own unique title, but basically sessions 3 through 5, or programs 3 through 5, deal with understanding the mind of a man. Ladies, you definitely want to watch these sessions because this is going to be very interesting for you. And sessions 6 through 8 are dealing with understanding the mind of a woman. Gentlemen, you definitely want to watch that. And by the way, this will be fair and balanced reporting, okay? Why am I calling this the Decoding series, Decoding the Communication Problem? Well, it's actually kind of a spoof on the fact that over the last several years, there's all these different books and different kinds of materials that have been published and presented on television programs and DVDs and movies even, like Decoding Revelation, you know, the Da Vinci Code, cracking the Da Vinci Code, Decoding the Bible, cracking the Bible Code. In fact, a friend of mine just got done writing a book called Decoding the Mystery. You know, and so it's kind of a spoof on that because we're going to actually be decoding one of the world's most difficult secrets. I mean, this is probably the most difficult code to crack out of the Da Vinci Code, the Book of Revelation, all these different things that people talk about. The subject we're going to be dealing with in this series is going to be about the relationship between a man and a woman, a husband and a wife, the marriage relationship. And I can hear some guys saying, amen, yep, that's right. I need to understand that wife of mine, or some lady saying, boy, yeah, we need to crack some kind of code here. I just don't get why my husband is the way that he is, why he does these things, you know, it drives me crazy. And this is going to be quite an entertaining, yet at the same time very convicting series, and I wish I would have learned about some of this material years ago. And I'll be honest with you, I've kind of shied away from books dealing with marriage relationships and husband and wife relationships over the years because so many of them are just kind of like pop psychology, you know, and it's like I'm not into pop psychology. I'm into the Word of God. I want something that's Bible-based. And some of the material I've come across recently has just been a tremendous help to my wife and I just felt convicted. I wanted to share some of this material with you. Not to mention the fact that over the last 15 years, I've seen good-willed Christian people who love the Lord, people who had really a clear understanding of the Bible. They could discuss Bible subjects and topics, and they could unveil, you know, the book of Daniel, the book of Revelation, but yet they end up in a divorce. And you just sit back and ask yourself, you know, what in the world is going on? Why is the divorce rate in the Christian church today as high as it is as the national average, you know, which is around 49%? You know, good-willed people who, you know, just something went wrong, and what went wrong at home? Why? I think we need to decode the communication problem. And I just want to say as an introduction to this too that over the last couple years I've ran across materials that I've gotten from some different people like for instance Shante and Jeff Fildahan. They've written the books called For Men Only and For Women Only, excellent books that are not psychology. It's basically scholastic material, that's academic material that's been put together based upon research and surveying hundreds of people and asking them questions. And they give you some general ideas of what men think and women think regarding specific questions and circumstances and relationships. And then also Dr. Emerson Egerich has been a tremendous help with me too in understanding some of this. So this is not all something that I've just come up with. This is some things that I've gleaned from other sources, and I've gotten special permission from the Fildahans and from Dr. Egerich to use some of their materials. And I just thank you for allowing me to do that in this series. You know, let's face it, men and women are different. And if we do not decode what we hear, we could have some serious problems in our relationships. I have to laugh a little bit. I had a job for several years at a school district. And I noticed that the people that work in the social services department of the school districts, whether they be high school or grade schools, there's some good people. I don't want to sound critical, but there's also some very liberal thinking amongst those people that become social workers. And I remember when I started working at this one school district, I got to know this lady who was just fresh out of college, and I got to know her a little bit, and I'd visit her in her office once in a while, and she was telling me about her graduate dissertation, her thesis that she wrote when she graduated from college to become a social worker. And that thesis was basically sharing this concept that there was nothing different between boys and girls other than what society and education and peer pressure puts upon them. In other words, to put in the ideal circumstances, men and women would be exactly the same, have all the same capabilities and all the same functions and thought processes and be the same. And you can tell that this is from a feminist agenda by listening to the topic, and how she approached it. And all I could do is laugh, because, hey, there's a difference between boys and girls, okay? And it was no sooner that she had a daughter, and then about a year and a half later, she had a little boy. And within another year, she had to throw her whole thesis out the window. Why? Because she saw that there was a difference between boys and girls. In fact, it makes me think about my daughter and my son, the two youngest in my family, Benjamin and Nacelle. It's kind of funny. When they were little kids, I'd go by Nacelle's bedroom. She has blue carpet on the floor. Her bedroom would be nice and clean. By the way, when girls get to be about 16 years old, that doesn't mean that their bedrooms are always going to be nice and clean, by the way. But when she was younger, she'd clean her bedroom all up, and I'd walk by her bedroom and just kind of look in there. And here she was playing store. She'd putting these little pieces of paper here, and she was selling this, and she was doing that, and doing this, and doing that, and selling stuff. And I would look in the door and just kind of look at her and smile, and then I'd walk by my son's room. You should see my son's room. And by the way, it hasn't gotten better with age. He's 18 and his room is still a mess. And he would be doing what? Yeah, ladies, you can tell me what your little boys would be doing. He had Lego forts, he's like building all these Lego forts, and he would be bombing it. I'd walk by his room and I'd hear these sounds, and he's bombing these Lego forts and army men all over the place and such. And it was quite obvious, there's a difference between boys and girls. There's a difference between men and women. And, the scary thing is that they grow up and they marry each other. And then they wonder why they can't communicate with each other, that they say one thing and the person interprets it another way, and the husband says something and the wife misunderstands, and the wife misunderstands what the husband says, and vice versa. And just to give you an example, just think about this one example really quickly. You can ask this one question. Let's say for an example, a husband and wife are going to go out to a formal gathering with some friends. The statement is made, "I have nothing to wear." Well, when a woman says, "I have nothing to wear," what she really means is, "I have nothing new to wear." Well, when a guy says, "I have nothing to wear," he's really saying, "I have nothing clean to wear." Here they are. They're saying exactly the same thing, but they're meaning two totally different things. That's kind of scary, Here is a man and a woman saying exactly the same thing, but coming from completely different angles on how they interpret what they say. Men and women are different, and if we do not decode in our communication and our experience, we can come into some pretty serious problems. We say things. What do we mean? What do we really mean when we say them? And does the other person really understand what we're saying? I just give you a really clear example. When I was about 20 years old, I had a couple antique cars, and one of my favorite cars was a 1936 Plymouth Coupe. Now, I was just like actually the real second owner to this car. There was a middleman between me and the estate that sold the car, but I had this car. I had something like 38,000 original miles on it, and it was a really nice classic car. And I drove up to this hamburger restaurant, a fast food restaurant, and they didn't have the speakers, where you could go up and order. You had to drive your car right up to this like little window, and I drove up to this little window, and I was going to order a hamburger. This is like when I was 20 years old, and I had this really nice old car. And I just need to tell you right up front, now I've always been, when I was younger, I was really always intimidated. I would get really nervous around, for instance, like police officers. I had to get pulled over by the police. I'd stutter and stammer, and around doctors and pastors, people like professional people, I would just get really nervous. And the other thing that would just really make me nervous was pretty girls. I got around pretty girls. I didn't know how to behave, and I was scared. And I've always had this unique ability to, open foot, insert mouth. Did you get that? And that's how well I can do it. But, I drove up to this hamburger place, and I pulled up with my 1936 Plymouth Coupe, and this really pretty lady who was probably around 30 years old looked through the little window, and she said to me, "Oh, I bet that car is older than me." She said, "What a cool car. I bet that car is even older than me." And I was kind of being nervous and timid, and I wanted to say something, make her feel good. And so I said nervously, "I doubt it." And she slammed the window shut. who's highly offended, and she refused to take my order. And I'm like, what's going on? You know, I was trying to encourage her, but here's what she heard. She heard, I'm sure, lady, you're older than this car. But what I meant to say was, lady, I doubt you could be as old as this car. I doubt it. You see, and here's a classic example of a guy trying to say something to a female, and it's completely distorted and misunderstood because, you see, we often interpret things from our experience. And in marriage, we often say things, but, you know, we're pulling from our background, we're pulling from our masculinity or our femininity, and we're hearing something completely different than what the other person is saying. And then we wonder, why are we having problems in our marriages? And then brick by brick, we build up these walls of misunderstanding. You know, this offense has taken place, this little statement was made, and a misunderstanding took place, and brick by brick we put up this big wall of miscommunication and misunderstanding in our relationships. And my wife and I have come to the point where we refer to that as Cold Wars. You know, you've probably heard about Cold Wars before, you know, like between Russia and the United States. Well, have you ever had Cold Wars in your home? Well, I've certainly had. Cold Wars are like, you know, you're cohabitating in the same house with each other, but your wife is like sleeping with her back to you, facing that way, and you're sleeping with your back to her, facing this way, and you live together. In fact, I've met a couple, and they went to church every Sabbath, and they lived together. They'd been married for 25, 30 years, but they lived in separate rooms. You know, they had this Cold War that brick by brick, this wall was built up in their home that the only time that they ran into each other is when they bumped into each other in the kitchen making something to eat, or when they went to church together. I never could figure that one out. But we developed these Cold Wars of this brick by brick wall that is built in our relationship, these walls of misunderstanding. You know, let me give you another example. For instance, there was this guy who invited some friends over for lunch on Sabbath. For you Aussies and Kiwis, you know, you would say, well, we invited someone over to have tea. And the wife, you know, she went out of her way to make a wonderful meal that Sabbath, and she put on a nice spread, and everybody was eating and visiting and having a wonderful time. And then finally sundown came, and the company decided they needed to leave. And the wife goes, you know, to her husband, that was the worst meal I've ever cooked. And the husband, you know, trying to console her, he says, no, honey, it's not. And she, you know, what did he mean by that? She goes, what do you mean by that? You know, what do you mean it's not? And he says, believe me, honey, no, it's not the worst meal you've ever cooked. Just trust me. You know, you've done far worse than this. Believe me, okay? And, you know, she can get upset. Or really what was he saying was, really, honey, look, you did a great job cooking. That's not the worst meal you've ever cooked. You did a great job. Don't worry about it. You're being too sensitive. You know, what was really meant. And you know, she could interpret it. Maybe during that week something was going on between the two when there was little digs going on, and there's bricks of offenses that had built up a partial wall in the relationship. And this was just like the icing on the cake, you know. It's like, he goes, well, no, honey, believe me, trust me, that wasn't the worst meal you've ever made. And she goes, well, what do you mean that wasn't the worst meal I ever made? And he says, oh, believe me, you've made a lot worse meals than this. Well, fine, why don't you just go home and go have your mom cook for you then, mommy's boy. And, you know, next thing you know, there's these two good-willed people that are fighting with each other and stomping off into separate rooms and looking out the window in the back room, and it's like, you know, why does this always happen? Why in my relationship with my husband does this always happen over and over again? You know, two good-willed people, and they're asking themselves, you know, what did he mean by that? What did she mean by that? And they're asking, I'm sure it's happened to you. You ask yourself, why in the world does my wife do this? Doesn't she see that this really bothered her? Or the wife is like, how come my husband just doesn't get it? You know, it's so rude what he did. Why? And, you know, these are Christian people. Now, look, not everybody's the same, and you can't generally apply the same principles to everybody, but you can look and see that there's tendencies and directions that people go in their relationships and things that they say and how they react to it. You know, sometimes when something is said and there's a reaction taking place, really what's happening is the issue of that situation really isn't the issue. I knew a fellow that he was trying to do something nice for his wife, and he decided, you know what I'm going to do is I'm going to buy my wife a new juicer. And so he bought her a really nice new juicer, and he took it home and he gave it to her, and the first day she got it out and she started making some carrot juice. And when she was done making the carrot juice, she had this big pile of carrot pulp. And she was like wanting to not waste that carrot pulp, so she decided that she would make some carrot cake. Well, she started looking through all her recipe books and everything, and she couldn't find any good recipes. And she told her husband, well, I'm going to go to one of my friend's house really quick. I'm sure she has a good recipe for carrot cake. And so she left, and as he was looking at this huge pile of carrot pulp, he was thinking, wait a second, I know a recipe for making carrot balls, you know, like these kind of like little round carrot balls. And so he took just a little bit of the carrot pulp, and he got this recipe out and got the oven warmed up, and he started making these carrot balls. And he put them in the oven, and she came home and she went ballistic. She goes, what are you doing? He said, I'm making some carrot balls. Well, she said, well, you knew I was making carrot cake. Why would you? And he goes, honey, there's tons left over. There's no reason to get all upset about carrot pulp. And she was like, well, do you think that we want to have 2 carrot recipes in the same house? I mean, how many people want to eat carrot balls and carrot cake? And they got into this discussion, this argument, all over this carrot pulp from this juicer that was given as a gift to her. And the truth is, it really probably wasn't even about carrot pulp. The truth is that there had been some other little offenses, some other things, miscommunications, little bricks that had been piled up that already had strained the relationship. And this was a trigger device. And as I share with you in this session about understanding the mind of a woman, you'll understand what's going on in a female's mind and dealing with situations like this, and all the pop-up windows and how they process stuff, totally different than the way guys think. You know, we need to learn to decode, and that's what God wants to help us do. He wants us to learn to decode. So let's turn to the scriptures. Genesis chapter 1, verse 27, it says, so God created man in his own image. In the image of God created him, male and female created he them. Now look at this. God created man and woman, in his own image. And it says in Genesis 5:2, it says, male and female created he them, and blessed them, and called their name Adam. In other words, the word Adam actually means in Hebrew man or mankind. It says, so he called their name Adam. They were the beginning of the Adams family, you could say, of the rest of the human race. And in that day that they were created, it goes on to finishing in that verse. Now, you ladies, take a look at this picture. Now, I want to ask you one simple question. Is this a boy or a girl? Now, all of you would know immediately, especially you ladies, that this is a little boy. Why? Well, this is a little boy because he's wearing a blue pajama outfit. Now, ladies, what is this? Okay, this is a little girl. Why? Because she's got a pink outfit on. Well, we dress little boys in blue. Like this one actually says Ben. That's the name of my son. He had an outfit kind of like this when he was a little boy. A little blue outfit for boys and a little pink outfit for girls. And then if you have twins, you know, you can get a matching set with the pink and the blue together, the little pink and blue pajama set. You know, that is a really nice thing to get. But have you ever stopped and asked yourself the one simple question, where in the world do we get pink for girls and blue for boys? Now, I've done a lot of research on this, and I've not been able to find a lot of information on it. There's a lot of speculation, but I have my own theory, and I'm not saying it's completely right, but I have my own theory. But pink really is what? A light red, okay? Well, and then blue, you can turn to the book of Numbers in the Old Testament, Numbers 15, verse 38 through 41, or if you have testimonies to the church, look at page 524, and you'll see that blue was embroidered on the bottom of the hem. The ribbon of blue was on the bottom of the hem of the high priest. Blue represents in the Bible the law of God, justice, obedience. And you stop and look at that, you say to yourself, it doesn't always apply to all men, but men have a tendency to lean on the side of justice, to lead on the side of law and order, to lead on the side of obedience, with the kids oftentimes. Now, there's some guys that, let their kids get away with everything, and the mom is the real strict one. But generally speaking, males have a tendency to emphasize law and justice. Where on the other hand, pink, which is really a light red, or oftentimes in the Bible it's called crimson, is also on the hem of the high priest, and you can find that in Exodus 39, verse 24. Red represents the blood of Christ, And of course, we know that the blood of Christ is what? It's what cleanses us. It's what forgives us. It's based in forgiveness and mercy. And Isaiah 1:18, it talks about that the blood of Christ cleanses us. You know, it can wash us whiter than snow. And generally speaking, those are female tendencies. You know, when you're dealing with the kids, the wife oftentimes is the one like, well, don't be too hard on them. You know, let's be careful. They represent mercy and forgiveness and giving people another chance. And you look at the color blue, which is representative of the law of God, the justice of God, and then you look at the color red or pink, which is representing the mercy of God or the forgiveness of God, and you put the two together, you get what color? You get purple. And so you see here that purple has always been a symbol of royalty. In fact, in Judges 8, verse 26, it says, "And the purple raiment that was on the kings of Midian." And then in John 19, verse 2, when Jesus was arrested, and they were trying him, they were mocking him, and they wanted to make him be a king, what was the thing that they did to him? They arrayed Christ in what? A purple robe. You see, a purple was always a symbol of royalty. It's a symbol of the Godhead. And it's a symbol of what God desires in the union of a man and a wife to reflect his image. In Ephesians chapter 5, verse 31, it says, "For this cause shall a man," which is blue, "leave his father and his mother, and shall be joined unto his wife," which is red or pink, "and the two shall become" what? "One flesh," purple. And there's something special about this union between man and woman. And so God created man in his own image. In the image of God created he, him, male and female. He created them. For what purpose? That the two of them together in this mystical union of marriage can reflect his character. Men in and of themselves aren't capable of completely reflecting the character of Christ, nor women, but there's this divine mystery about the union of man and woman, that the two of them together represent the character of God. And it's interesting, when God created Eve, he actually took a rib out of Adam. And you notice he took a rib out of Adam. Why did he take a rib out of Adam? Well, he wanted the woman to be part of his flesh, bone of his bone, flesh of his flesh, but there was more to that. He didn't take a part of the skull, so that the woman is higher than the man and is dominating and nagging and dominating and pushing the man around, nor did he take a toe bone out of Adam to make a woman so that the men could trample women under his feet. He took a rib, which is in the center part of man, to show that there's equality in this relationship between man and woman. Now, as you look at this allegory of the blue and the pink, you have to actually look at the fact that men, they wear blue sunglasses and women wear pink sunglasses. They see things differently. Women look at things differently with their pink filters, and men look at things with their blue filters, and men and women are wired differently. They're going to see things differently. There's a craziness that's going on in society today, and this craziness is happening more than we realize to goodwill people who brick by brick build up walls of misunderstandings around themselves. And you know what happens? It ends up in divorce. And I just want to share with you really quickly about the divorce rates in the world. Take a look at this chart. For instance, do you know where the highest divorce rate in the world is? Oh, a lot of people thinking UK or United States, right? No, Belarus. In Belarus, part of the former Soviet Union, 68% divorce rate. And then you can go to Russia, the Russian Federation, 65% divorce rate. Next is Sweden, 64% divorce rate. And then you can go to the Czech Republic, 61% divorce rate. And then in Belgium, 56% end up in divorce. And then Finland, 56%, tied with Belgium. United Kingdom comes in at 53%. And then finally Moldova, which is part of the former Soviet Union right next to Romania, comes in at 52%. And then the United States at 49%, right at 50%. And then right behind that is New Zealand at 26%. And then tied almost with that is Australia at 25%. And then Canada is tying with Australia at 25%. Now these figures don't mean anything. Why? Well, it's quite obvious why these figures don't mean anything. It's because more and more people are choosing not to get married. These figures only represent the trend of the country for those people who legitimately go out and get married in a court of law. But the truth is more and more people are not getting married. So these statistics are way skewed off balance because a lot of people are living together. And like my daughter, who was not in the church, she was living with this boy. And when they started having problems, you know what he said? He said, time to recycle, time to recycle. which meant like time to go out and get a new girlfriend or new boyfriend, live together with them. And a lot of people are choosing to do that. So these statistics really aren't very accurate because the separation between men and women that are living together is extremely high. And this craziness, this divorce craziness is all over. What is craziness? Now, you've maybe heard this definition before, but craziness is when we do the same thing over and over with the same ill effect. Now, if I came to your church and was having some meetings, and I was standing in the parking lot trying to shut the door in the car, and the door wouldn't latch, and I did it 4 or 5 times, and then I walked away, you would say, wow, there's something wrong with the door in his car. Well, if I stood in the parking lot for 5 hours, and I was shutting the door and shutting the door and shutting the door, you wouldn't say there was something wrong with the door, you would say there was something wrong with me, right? Well, that's craziness. And there's something wrong today in our society that men and women are not understanding each other. Men understand, or they think they understand. Women understand, or they think they understand, but they often don't understand each other. Well, that's where our next session is going to take us. Our next session is going to be dealing with the secrets that decode the communication problem, because this craziness in society has just gone out of control, and people are having these walls of dissension and miscommunication going on, and the most innocent things are blown out of proportion, and good-willed men and women are going to the divorce courts and seeing the lawyer. The lawyers are only there for the good of mankind, right? To help work out the marriage relationship. Well, that's not really the case. But that is really what is happening today, and it's epidemic in Western society and culture. And the question is how can we go to the Word of God and learn to decode the communication problem between men and women so we can stop this crazy cycle, and that we can learn to communicate with our spouses in a God-given way that God intended us to be able to have that type of relationship that reflects the image of God and the character of God in that mystical union between a man and a woman, between a husband and a wife, in one of the oldest institutions found in Scriptures, found in the Garden of Eden, the institution of marriage.